welcome to another episode of Exploring Standards. I am your host, Jess, and today we are welcoming back on the podcast Kathy Clements. Kathy, how are you today?
Great, thank you. How are you?
I am good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me again. For those who haven't listened to the podcast before, Kathy has been on several times over all 3 seasons. And Kathy is an ISO consultant for Assent Risk Management. She is a consultant in ISO 9001 Quality Management and ISO 14001 Environmental Management. And she's also a head of business development and partnerships. So our episode today is all about the top 5 non-conformances of ISO 14001. Before we really get into that though, Kathy, can you just give our listeners a real brief overview of what ISO 14001 is?
Of course. So it is 14,001, the 2015 version. We are expecting a new version to be coming out in the next couple of years because they try and update them between every sort of 5 and 10 years. Obviously, we're getting towards the 10 years, but a lot of things have happened in the last few years that might have delayed it slightly. And it's a standard for environmental management, which means helping your company to set up a system to identify the things you have that could impact the environment and set up some processes to try and reduce those impacts and implement some good, positive environmental impacts instead, so that you can be doing good things for the environment as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you. As you said, there has been a lot going on in the environmental sort of sector at the moment. So it will be really interesting to see what this new version, when it does come out, brings. Yeah, definitely. So we are looking at the top 5 non-conformances that we have found with ISO 14001. So where we get this data from, as a proactive ISO consultancy, Assent records anonymously all the findings that we come across. So this is both with the internal audits that our consultants do and also any external audits that they're a part of, which are from the certification bodies. Now we put all these findings into a database, which is all anonymized. So you can't trace it back to any of our clients. It is completely anonymous. And this data gives us a good idea of the sort of the trend analysis on what's going on within sort of each specific standard, especially those sort of long-term ones that have been around for a while. We can sort of see the trends that the certification auditors are looking for. And this data then also helps us when we bring on new clients. We can sort of see what's been going on, which is fantastic. So there are 2 versions of this database that we have, and the first one is completely internal, which is one that we access as Assent, and our consultants can look at. Again, it is completely anonymized. It just has some other metrics on there. But we do have a second version, which is available for everyone. And this has been put together not only with Assent, but some of our colleagues and peers. So together we've collected anonymous data and put it together through an association called the UK Consulting. So this has a public dashboard that has a limited subset of this information. It shows the clauses and the standard where these issues are raised. So what I will do is I will pop a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to check out this dashboard. I'll pop a link as to where you can find it. So what we've done is we have gone to our internal dashboard, had a look at the results for ISO 14001, the top non-conformances. The date range that we were looking at is from 2020 to currently. And we're going to go into our top 5 non-conformances that we've noticed. And number 5 is clause 6.1.2, and that's environmental aspects. Kathy, can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yes, so this one's a pretty straightforward one. Luckily, environmental aspects and impacts is the continued point of that clause. So an aspect is something you do, and an impact is obviously the impact it has. So if you think aspect more like activity, you'll start thinking along the right lines.
Mm-hmm.
What environmental aspects and impacts requires you to do is to assess those things your company does that could have an impact on the environment and the potential impact it could have. This usually comes in the form of a register with some scoring for severity and frequency, and how bad this could be as a gross score. And then you look at it again based on what controls you have in place already that could reduce that impact if you act on them properly. And the whole point of it is to help you identify some things you might not think of within your company. And that is where it tends to fall down. This is why it's our 5th highest clause. Is because, okay, everyone thinks, well, separating my recycling, turning my lights off, turn the computers off. Do people think about the fact that they might have a water urn, boiling water, and it just keeps the water hot so that people can make their cups of tea? That's using electricity constantly. Do you need that? Could we perhaps put a kettle or a coffee machine in? And it's those 10 types of things that tend to get missed, and therefore it's raised as a finding because your risks are not a complete assessment. You haven't fully encapsulated all those things your company does, like traveling. Do your staff travel to work by car? If they do, I'm afraid that's an impact that your company has because your staff have to travel to your work. But a positive thing could be you encourage them to take the train by either subsidising their travel or by ensuring that your location, if you do move office, is right near to a train station or a bus station or something. Obviously, a lot of these are long-term as well as short-term aspects, and that's usually where it gets found out. That, or they haven't been reviewed. If you haven't reviewed them within the year, you need to check that that's still the case because it might not still be the case for you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So, going in at number 4 is clause 8.2. And this is emergency preparedness and response. Kathy, do you want to talk us through this one, please?
Yes, so this is another one where everyone thinks of the immediately obvious, which is, we have fire smoke detectors and there is an alarm system and we have fire extinguishers. But emergency preparedness and response isn't necessarily just about that one key element. It's also about not predicting, but assessing and analysing emergency situations that could happen. For example, how old is your drainage network? Where I live, it's really, 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 really old. And so we're well aware that if something happens, it could shut down our road, we could lose our water source. That would make working from home a little more difficult. And that's an emergency you might have to consider for where your people work. Obviously, we can't go into so much detail about where people live, etc., etc. But certainly your office you can. And those are things that are not necessarily considered. It's also spill response. Do you have bottles of things that your company uses? If so, have you got them on an appropriate tray that if they were to get knocked over, the spill would be contained? Do you have a spill kit? Do you know your drainage system? Do you know where the drains go in your car park? If somebody's car suddenly leaks fuel, where is that going? And therefore, what drains do you have to protect and how do you respond? And this is, again, like the environmental aspects, why it comes up so often as a finding. Because people see the obvious bit, and of course we do. You know, we're busy, we chuck in the things that are most in our awareness every day, but not necessarily go as far as to say, I have prepared by ensuring we have this, this procedure and people know about it, and I have planned our response, and here is our response plan that someone would grab in an emergency and follow. And that's the bit that gets people, oh yeah, we've got the fire risk assessment and we've got the fire extinguishers. Have you run your fire drills? Have you seen how quickly you can get people out of the building? Have you done that regularly? That it's that extended, that one extra step that tends to be what the auditors find.
Wow, yeah. Do you know, I wouldn't have thought about that. You're totally right, isn't it? It's the things that you immediately see and think, oh, yeah, that's it. But it's the things that are out of
Got
sight,
that?
out of mind
Yep.
almost, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Right, coming in at number 3 is clause 8.1, operational planning and control.
Yes. This is even the title of the clause is vague, which is really unfortunate. So, operational planning and control is about how you do what you do. It's the things that make your business go, and it's the planning of and control of them. So, have we got a procedure for how to do this thing to make that happen? And how do we make sure that people are doing the thing as we've told them to do to make it happen? And this is where you get the crossover with things like 9001, is that yes, you're still looking at how is it done? Is everyone doing it the same way? It's not just being, scatter some stones and see what happens, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure we're doing this properly. And from the environmental perspective, the reason we need the planning and control is to reduce your environmental impacts. So let's say you're a manufacturer and you have to cut out lino, and you need to get as much lino as possible out of this one sheet that you've got. It's not only for efficiency and for cost saving for you, but the least waste you can create, the better. And this also knocks on to what then happens to that waste.
Mm-hmm.
Is it recycled? Is there a contractor who can take it away and make sure it's responsibly destroyed or responsibly recycled or given to community projects? There's all kinds of things now. And that is the bit where people don't make the connection, is
Mm-hmm.
we call it a life cycle perspective. From
Yeah.
beginning to end of that material, from beginning to end of your company's processes, have you thought of everything and where it's going and what the impact might be for the environment at those various points? And it sounds huge, but I promise it's really not. When you actually look at it and you say, well, we do this, and this is the result, and then this happens, and that's the result, those are the bits you need, is those points. And so once you
Mm-hmm.
start doing it, it really does make a lot of sense because you can't not do it.
No, that makes yeah. I see what you mean. It does sound like a big job as you're explaining it, and I think your example was perfect.
Yeah.
But I think, like any standard, once you've got the work in place, it starts to make sense and it starts to really fall in place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah.
those initial steps can be quite time consuming, but once they're there, then it's kind of within your organization all the time, isn't it? And it becomes
Yes, it gets into the consciousness. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Right, number 2 is clause 6.2, and this is environmental objectives and planning to achieve them.
Okay, so if you have any other ISO systems, you're going to know exactly what objectives are.
Mm-hmm.
And objectives are quite literally something you're aiming to do, something you would like to do that is an improvement. Now, environmental objectives, they very easily get caught because people go either too grand or too generic. That's where
Mm-hmm.
these findings come in. I was surprised this was only number 2. I'm not going to lie, because it's very easy to do that. Oh, we're going to send 40% of our waste to recycling. Okay, but firstly, is that actually possible? Can
Mm-hmm.
you actually do that? What kind of waste are you producing? Secondly, how are you measuring that? How can you evidence that that's happening? And thirdly, do you even have the capacity in your area where your business operates to get that recycling taken away responsibly? Because a lot of councils don't do recycling for business waste, and it's not necessarily something people consider. So we use a format called SMART, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time focused. And we say, please give yourself a spread of maybe 3 objectives. Give yourself one for this year, one for 5 years' time, and one for 10 years' time.
Yeah.
Spread it out and monitor them constantly. Keep checking how are we doing on them. And this can be as simple as every quarter when you do your financial, recce, you then look at those objectives and say, how are we doing on those? Can we advance some? Does some need moving back a little bit and give us a bit more time? And obviously make sure there's stuff that you are actually able to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've summed up really, really well, because smart targets and smart goals, there's no point making all these wonderful sort of objectives that you're like, oh, we're going to do all these big, brilliant things, but we have no idea how we're going to achieve them. But actually, let's do 3 things really, really, really well. You're going to have much more impact than sort of these
Yeah.
whimsical, all over the place, kind of half-hearted doing these things.
Yeah. I mean, a key one I'm seeing at the moment a lot of is, we're going to make sure our business runs entirely on green energy. Okay, have you checked with your energy supplier that they even do green energy? Because some of them prioritize homes instead of businesses. Some don't do it at all. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful objective. I'm not saying it's not, but you need to not trip yourself up by making sure you've done the research. And that's the key one I'm seeing at the moment. Oh, well, we did want to be 100% green, but it turns out we can only get one energy supplier and they don't do green. Okay, change your objective, because forget it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's not going to work, is it? Yeah. Okay, lovely. So our top one, our number one that comes in is clause 6.1.3, and that's compliance obligations. So let's go into that one.
Yes. So this one I can completely understand why it's such a trip hazard, for want of a better phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called compliance obligations for a reason. It's very easy to forget. Okay, you've got maybe a legal register. Wonderful. A lot of companies don't think about having a legal register or some kind of um, way of monitoring the laws they have to comply to. This is not just environmental laws. You should really have one for all those sort of business critical and employment laws as well. But for the purposes of this, we're talking about the laws around environmental protections, and that can include things like uh, noise levels and use of the main roads, and can you actually get commercial vehicles on the land you're on? Is that legally allowed? Some areas are protected, etc. But I said compliance obligations because it's not just about laws. You need to comply with a lot of things as a business. And in quality, we look at how are you identifying your customers' compliance requirements? How are you identifying your suppliers' compliance requirements? In the environmental management system, we're looking at things like, are you complying with 14001? Are you complying with FSC, if that's something that's possible for you guys? So it encapsulates all those things that have um, a requirement for you to do something and to prove it. And
Mm-hmm.
that is where this finding is raised. Because, okay, you can download a legal register off of probably any number of places, but especially now we've got AI. Have you checked they all actually apply to you? They might not
Mm-hmm.
apply to you as a business.
Yeah.
Have you checked that you can actually comply with them? And if not, you need to look into making sure you either can or doing something to make sure you're not going to get, in any kind of sticky situation later down the road. And don't just think about laws. Think about all those other things that you are required to comply with as a company, environmentally as well. If you're over a certain size, don't forget about things like the COP26, and I think we're now on to COP50 and things like this. Those big conferences, they come out with lots of compliance obligations for certain sectors or certain, and although they're not going to get you in trouble if you don't do them, there is an expectation you will if you
Mm-hmm.
meet the criteria. So
Yeah.
look into those as well. But if you have a consultant, they will be able to access all that information very quickly for you. So don't panic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have Assent bring out a newsletter every month that kind of updates you with the
Yeah.
all the laws that are coming out and sort of what sector they deal with. So you can sign up to that. But as Kathy said, it's not necessarily everyone applies to you, so you have to figure out which ones do apply to you. I believe our Resilify platform also has the legal register as well that you can access and have a look. But once again, it doesn't apply to you, and that's kind of where a consultant really does come in handy. Although you can access all this information, it might not be relative to you, and you need to understand that, especially in terms of ISO 14001. So that is our top 5 non-conformances for ISO 14001 environmental management. Kathy, thank you so much for going through them with us today. If you need any help with ISO 14001, if you're getting stuck on any of these non-conformances that might be coming up, please contact us because we can help, especially Kathy. She's absolutely brilliant at this, at all this,
Thank
as you
you.
can tell. Before we go, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
As we're talking about environmental management, I would just like to highlight that there are some changes potentially coming out regarding sustainability and carbon reduction. We know there was a lot of noise about it last year, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
all gone a little bit quiet, and that's because there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So please do monitor that, because there will be thresholds for size of company, what you do, where you operate, and just make sure you're keeping yourself up to date with that information, because then you can be ahead of it rather than, it all landing and suddenly you've got to find time to sort it out. And of course, that's something that we can also help with our newsletters and with our people.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Right, well, thank you very much for listening to today's episode of Exploring Standards. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the podcast. And we'll be back with another episode in a couple of weeks.